Ladies and gentlemen, some new faces and some faces that I saw last night. So thank you again for having me back. It's interesting after the first night, you never know. They want you back, or they say, let's just change the meeting and not tell them. It'll be okay. We can just say that we left the car in the parking lot so that maybe he won't come. But that's an in joke for some of you who don't. And she can tell you about it later. But tonight we're going to, in a very short period of time that we have, we're going to share some of what I wrote about in the book. And as I was telling, there we go, right there, I can see myself on the thing here, so I'll try and stay focused so that the people out there can see it. But one of the things that I did, and I got to show you this. This is one of the lessons. Is when you're doing something and you're using PowerPoint, for example, one of the things I always do is I print it off, because you never know, like we don't have the computer, something doesn't work, or you take a look at the agenda for tonight, last night, and see that it says 45 minutes instead of 90 minutes. So I had to take this and cut it in half. So no problem. But so I did that for you. Luckily for me, the hotel had a computer that had PowerPoint on it, so I could go and delete, and make it shorter so that we can fit it into the time frame that we have. Because that's one of the things you do as a speaker, is you work within the time frame that you have. And Toastmasters is really good that way. When I started down this path as a professional speaker, I used to ask my clients, how long do I have to speak? Eventually I got to a point of saying, when would you like me to finish? Because sometimes their expectations change based on what was happening. And I can remember speaking in San Francisco once, and they had had a long day, and they had like an open house, and people had been drinking and whatever, and they were running late. And so I said to the lady, I said, I can trim my hour and 15-minute program down for you. And she said, oh, would you? And that's when I got my first raise as a speaker, because same money, 45 minutes instead of an hour and 15 minutes. So I thought that was a good thing. But I also started learning to meet the needs of my audience. Now, whether you're a Toastmaster or a professional speaker, that's what this is about. One of the things I mentioned last night is, for me, when I learned that it wasn't about me, it was about you, I started having fun. It started getting to be more interesting. It started to be, I could relax and have some fun up here, because it's about playing. It's about sharing some ideas, hopefully, that I have learned that will help you in what you're learning, so that when the evening is done, you walk away going, hey, that's cool. And I'm going to take something back, so when I go into Canada, yeah, I learned something in Athens that I didn't know. See, that's what we call a touchback. Something that you do. That's also something you do as a speaker, is you can play on what other people do, except you can't do it. I just read in the rules, you can't do it in the World Championship. You're not allowed to touch back on other people's things, which I think is stupid, personally. And that's recorded, I don't care. Because I love that. Very often, if I'm speaking at a convention, if I'm either the first or the second or the last speaker, I'll find out who else is on the agenda. And a lot of times I know who they are, so I'll say, what is it you're talking about? And is there something really significant that you're sharing, a really good story? So then I can say, when George spoke on Monday, or like on Friday morning, remember when he said this? I wasn't there, but they don't know I wasn't there. But it touches back on what he did and brings it back to the audience. Or, well, I hope tomorrow that George tells you the story of, which is a setup for George to do better. And that's what you do, is you do that for everyone. So very quickly, we'll do some of that. Can you imagine? That's you, right on that side of the microphone. And that's the hundreds and hundreds of people that are out there waiting for you to say something that will change their lives. Okay, hopefully they're making something that will at least make you interesting. So it doesn't always change your lives, but sometimes at least it makes it interesting. And that's the whole point. If you're doing it, whether it's a Toastmaster Club, a meeting like this, or in some cases, the biggest audience I've done is, I think, 10,000 people, which is really funny, because there I am, this little guy, and they've got these big jumbotrons. And I was mesmerized. I'm looking at myself being like 18 feet tall. And they're not looking at the little guy here. It's like in the Wizard of Oz. Don't look at the guy behind the curtain. Look at the guy on the screen. But anyway, that's you. That's part of what we're doing tonight. I'm going to give you some tips and a few techniques in the short period of time that I have to help you be better. and some stuff that you can take into your workplace. We talked about that last night, where Toastmasters can help you with your work and with your career and your business and those kinds of things. So we're doing that. So I even added some local history and some other people. I'm not afraid to pull on expertise wherever I can find it. And, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. I didn't know that. I do now. So, first thing I want to talk about, this is just a real simple thing, is the 3 M's. We talked about that basically last night. Know yourself, the message, the messenger, and the method. That's what this stands for. The message is first, because that's what's most important. When you're putting together a presentation, it's the message that matters. It's thinking about, what can I give this audience that will be good for them to help them grow, or help them make more money, or help them do whatever you're trying to do for them. So it's a focus on the message. Then the next part is the messenger. That's you. How do I make sure I'm the right person? I'm in the right mental frame. I have the right energy to deliver this with impact. Because that's, again, my responsibility. That's what I bring to the table. I've done my homework. I know what I'm talking about. And I know me, so I'm ready to deliver. It's like, it doesn't matter how you feel. It's like, I don't know, somewhere last night I was talking to somebody about speaking in Cape Town. Cape Town? And I was deathly sick. I was wearing a mask and I couldn't see it. But I was really sick, and I almost didn't go on, which never happened. And nobody knew it except one person, because I had stopped to talk to them on the way in. I said, yeah, I'm not feeling good, but we'll do that. So you make sure you're ready, because you're a critical element in the success of your presentation. You gotta know your stuff, you gotta know yourself. And the method is simply, what are you going to use to deliver it? The method is important, but it's not critical. I would rather have somebody who is passionate about their program, who is passionate about what they're talking about, and has some basic, a good, solid message, than somebody who's a polished and professional speaker. Have you ever seen that? Some people are so polished, it's like people are salespeople,
Yes.
Hi, how are you? I want to sell you something. Oh, and they just get into it. And it's like, oh, don't touch me. Although the guy did that the other day. I told you that story last night. Yeah, just come in, just have a beer, have a cup of coffee. Next thing we knew, we were having lunch. I wasn't wanting lunch. I wanted a coffee. And first, anyway, he was really good. You should study. I'll tell you what you can study. So let's talk about some of the keys to success for you as a speaker, because that's what we're here for tonight. Careful. I wouldn't want to fall on my head. Again, somebody you might know. The old guy. Excellence is not a gift, but a skill that takes practice. We do not act rightly because we are excellent. In fact, we achieve excellence by acting rightly. That's part of what we learn in Toastmasters. You learn the fundamentals, and then you apply the fundamentals. And as you apply them, you get better. And as you do it more frequently, you get more relaxed at doing it. Somebody was talking about, what do I do with my hands? And I said, I don't know. They got a mind of their own. They just do their thing. So, but that comes from good. So this I talked about basically last night, the knowledge pool in terms of your expertise. That's a big pool of knowledge, everything you know about everything you know. And then you talk about empathy, which is the audience. What do I know about the audience? So that I can share something with them that would make sense for them out of what I know. So I'll pluck pieces out of here to say this would make a beneficial presentation. And the third thing is, what do I know about me? Which is, again, going back to the key point of saying, delivering it like myself, with my own energy, with my own experience, with my own whatever, and bringing that, because that's when I succeed, is when it's me sharing ideas with you, not just some guy standing up here going, oh, but just me sharing ideas. So, in the book, I talk about 6 major speaking faults. So these are things that Toastmasters will help you with. They're very successfully implemented if you apply them. So here's a few things. First one is unclear purpose. If you're putting together a presentation and you're not sure where you're going, you don't know what you're doing, it doesn't work effectively. So you really need to be clear on what is the purpose of your presentation. Am I here to inform? Am I here to make you laugh? Am I here to challenge you to grow? What am I doing? What's the end result when I'm finished? What will you get from? I need to touch this. Join the audio? Good. There you go. I don't want to play with it because I'm not the techie. That's okay. If I mess it up, I'm okay. There you go. But that's the point in terms of making sure you're really clear on where you're going, because that helps you put together your presentation. If you know what the end result is, when you're finished your presentation, what you want them to know, feel, or do. That helps you put it together, because then you pull the pieces and help you build that roadmap to get there. So same thing is, lack of clear organization, which is similar to that. Have you ever seen a speaker that seems to be all over the place? I'll talk about this, and then talk about this, and go over here. I'll give you a little secret. If you're doing something, and for example, you forget something, don't make a big deal about it. I've learned, this is a little trick I've learned. I was just thinking about something I said earlier. And I thought I would add to it. Instead of saying, I know there were 7 things, and there's one of the slides on here that has 7 Beatitudes. And for whatever reason, we were speaking in Beijing or someplace. And the slide somehow had morphed and I only had 6. And somebody said, what's the 7th one? And for the life of me, I couldn't remember. I looked at it and I couldn't remember. And I'd only done that presentation 100 times. And I couldn't remember what the 7th one was. I had to go look in the book. So, too much information. Now, I don't know if this works here in Greece or not, but one of the things that I see people do is they've studied and they've organized a presentation. And in Toastmasters, we work in 5 to 7 minute speeches usually. And we try and fit 25 to 30 minutes into 5 to 7 minutes. And the audience is going, whoa, too much. We data dump. We give people too much. The other thing that happens is we don't support our ideas. Unless you're talking about something that's motherhood and apple pie that everybody accepts as being true, if you have something, tell it where it came from. If it's just your opinion, that's okay. The one thing that people don't realize is it's okay to say, this is my experience. But if you quote something, a lot of people in the audience will want to know where you quoted it. And I guarantee you, if you're in a large enough group, there'll be somebody in the audience who says, well, that's true, but there was a study that just got released last week that counteracts what you just said. So you have to work on being current and up to date. So about support, here's a key that we can help in Toastmasters. Monotonous or sloppy speech. Guys especially have this. We have this monotone that happens. And when we get nervous, we go, really sexy voice. we go right down there, and that's, hi, I'm a Toastmaster. I'm really nervous now, so I'm keeping it cool. I'm just keeping it cool. Women, the other way, they go like this. So in between the two is the thing. So the sloppy speech really makes sense, because if they don't understand you, they don't get what you're saying. And even more so when you're working within cultures where English is the second language, which is the only language I mangle. I don't speak anything other than English, and even there sometimes I don't do it well. That's true, absolutely. I make up words sometimes. You get to a certain age where you can't think of words, so you make one up. Who's gonna know? You're the expert. They probably think, or you say, here's a little thing, say, I can't think of what the translation is in English. They think you're smart. And not meeting the needs of the audience. That's the key thing. When you're doing a presentation, you need to meet the needs of your audience. But how do you know that? You ask questions. You do your homework. You find out who they are. Who am I speaking? In this case, I know I'm speaking to Toastmasters. I know who you are because I am one. But if I wasn't, I would ask a lot of questions. When I'm doing it for a corporate client, I will say, give me the contact information for 5 people that are representative within your organization that will be in the audience. And I will ask them questions. I'll either phone them or email them or talk to them. And then I'll also talk to people when I get there early, because I'll come early and talk to people. Hi, what are you here? And whatever. And sometimes I learn things that help me adjust my presentation to be that much more effective. Because somebody said, well, I'm here because my boss made me come. Okay, I know that that's not an enthusiastic learner, but I'm gonna watch it and see if I can bring them in. You know, somebody else says, well, I'm hoping to learn this, and I go, yeah, me too. Or sometimes they'll say, I can hardly wait to hear what you say. And I go, yeah, me too. Because it doesn't come out the same way twice. Even though I've done this program in various lengths, you know, sometimes for a full day, it doesn't come out the same way. Because my life has changed. Like next time I do this, I've got 2 more districts that I'm doing stuff for in April and May. I've got some pictures from Athens and other places in the Mediterranean here that will show up in the presentation, because that's fun for me. It reminds me that my dream of traveling the world happened because I became a Toastmaster. And that reminds me that I'm still on track to hit the 100 countries before I die. I've got 65 now. I was doing really good until COVID, but I'm catching up now. But anyway, that's me in Copenhagen. That piece of stone there is the actual center point of the city from which everything is measured. And if you're speaking, you need to have some reference point to work from, so you keep things organized. You ask yourself some questions. Why this topic? Why me? Why this audience? What am I talking about? Who am I talking to? When am I talking? When is good? You know, sometimes you want to know, you know, what time of the day. If you're speaking in the morning, the afternoon, the evening, it makes a difference in terms of how you present, depending on the time of day. How long? Because that's something we'll learn to ask. And where? Where is always important. I remember getting a phone call from a lady. She said, hi, this is so-and-so from the National Kitchen and Bath Association in Portland. We'd like to have you come speak to our chapter. And I've done a number of their chapters. I said, great. I said, let me check my date. Yeah, I'm in Boise, Idaho. And I'm speaking there 2 days. I could probably get on a plane, fly over, because their evenings are in the evening. I know they're dinner beds. And she laughed. I said, why are you laughing? She said, I'm talking about Portland, Maine, which is on the other side of the country. I would be late before I even left. So I said, I can't do it. She was laughing because she knew I was thinking Portland, Oregon. It's like an hour's flight. No problem. I get to it the same weekend. So anyway, she booked me for the following October. But had I not known, can you imagine? Where's the speaker? I don't know. He's in Portland, Oregon. Whoops. And what tools do you want? You know, PowerPoint, flip charts, those kinds of things. And you want to know what the tools are. We'll talk about that in a bit. But so here's something. This is something people talk about handling the nerves. How many of you get nervous when you speak? How many of you just lied? How many aren't willing to say you get nervous when you speak? I get nervous when I speak. I was really nervous about last night because it was a new group, and it wasn't a formulated evening like tonight where I've done this thing 100 times all over the world. So I know this back and forth. I just have to make sure I figured out which slides I cut out. So there was a little bit of nervousness, but I've learned that, you know, nervous is normal. Just so you know that. If you're not nervous, you're not pushing the edge. The only time you should be nervous if you haven't done your homework. If you haven't done your homework, you should be scared, because you might luck out. But that's only going to go so far, and it's going to bite you big time. So you want to make sure that you do that. Then there's a complimentary download for a book for you. But anyway, here's how you deal with it. Don't lie to yourself. Don't say to yourself, no, I'm not nervous. No problem, I'm not nervous. Look at me. I'm as cool as a cucumber or whatever. I don't know why you want to be cool as a cucumber, but we say that. It doesn't make a thing to me. I don't like cucumbers. So cool as a cucumber. I like that. That's okay. We'll change it. Don't lie. Admit it. Say, you know, I'm feeling a little anxiety. I'm feeling energy. I was actually in a speech contest once when I was in Toastmasters before I got into leadership and I couldn't compete anymore. And I had a lady, in those days I used to pace it. And I'm pacing, and she said, are you nervous? I said, yeah. She said, oh, you're not nervous. Yeah, I'm nervous. She said, nervous is just the other side of being excited. So when I walked on stage, as I walked past her, I said, now I'm really excited. And I won the contest, which blew my mind, because it was supposed to be funny, and I didn't know I could be funny, especially at my house. So, yeah, second thing is be mentally prepared. If you your homework, you'll be less nervous than if you haven't. If you've thought about the audience, you've thought about your message, you've thought about you, so that you're ready to deliver, that takes care of a lot of the stuff you could screw up on. And that's the only thing you should be nervous about. Other than that, here's another thing. Have you ever sat in an audience and thought to yourself, man, I hope this speaker bombs. I hope this guy just really sucks big time. No. And the audience you should speak to aren't saying that either. They want you to succeed, even more so in Toastmasters. I think I told you the story last night, or I did somewhere. We had a speech contest and one of the competitors got stuck. And he backed up and started at the beginning. He did that 3 times. And the other competitors were down at the bottom saying, relax, breathe, you'll get it. They were coaching him to get through this stuck period. They weren't saying, oh, good, you're going to lose. They're not. People want you to win. They don't want boring speakers. That's what politicians are all about. And you've got the same problem here. I don't understand a word, but I go, oh yeah, politician, I can see it. I see the whole gestures, the whole bit. We got it. So be mentally prepared. Do something physical. When I had the longer version, I have people actually do things. Like you guys don't have this thing, but in Canada we have this thing called winter. You have winter, but you don't have winter. There's a difference between winter and winter.
Yeah.
We wear these things called overcoats. It's a survival thing. And so I tell people, pretend you're wearing your coat and it's on your shoulders and you lift and let it down. Because a lot of the nervous energy goes right into your shoulder. A whole bunch of stuff. I do things like wiggle your jaw and whatever. If you think about it, the people who are doing Olympics or those kinds of things will do warm-ups. My wife would know that because she's an Olympic-rated referee for throws. And she sees people doing warm-ups. It's not funny. You see I saw a guy in one of the races, and he was standing over the side going like this, just getting ready. That could be the difference between 1/10 of a second between first and thanks for playing. They don't care what it looks like. Do what you need to do so you're relaxed and you bring your energy to yourself. Norman Vincent Peale, maybe you probably wouldn't know who he was. He wrote a number of books, maybe a long time ago. He wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. He did How to Win Friends and Influence People. I had a chance to work with him once. He was in his mid-60s. A little man about my height, salt and pepper hair, lots of flakes on his and he literally backstage was going like this before he walked on stage. I think he wanted to make sure he wasn't dead. And then he walked down on stage, and for an hour, he mesmerized that audience. He had this, and he spoke with an enthusiasm. This little guy with this big voice. And there was 2,000 people in the audience going, wow. One of them was me saying, someday I want to do that. 22 years later, I started down this path. But I still remember that moment. So do something physical. Keep in mind you can do it. Here's a few personal tips I told you about. When I go to the job, breathe. Here's a secret on breathing. Let it out. I've literally seen people. Have you ever seen somebody hyperventilate and they stand up? That's not a good way to start your presentation. I guarantee you, you hit the floor. You can't say, well, this is just another stage of my speech. And the other thing is, if you're sitting down, make sure your legs aren't crossed. Because if you do that, you cut off the blood to your brain. And you need your brain when you're speaking. At least some of us do. I do. I need every ounce of this that I can, which is why I never do drugs, because I've got enough problems with it. Keep your arms at your side, twirl your wrists, whatever. Talk to yourself. Tell yourself good stories. You're confident. You can do this. You know your stuff. You've done your homework. They like you. They're not hoping you suck. Go have fun. So anyway, here's something. Opening, body, and conclusion. That's the essence of a speech. Whether you're doing a small one at Toastmasters or your table topics, or although a table topic you just make it up. Opening, body, and speech, and conclusion. If you notice there, I made the mistake of learning how to skydive. They say that because the second time I came, when you do that, you're actually flying what they call a paraglider type thing, sail, and you're coming in against the wind, and then you flare, which is being pulled the two things, and it drops the chute, and the air comes out of the chute, and you gently slip down. Kind of like you did last night. Except my second time. I came in, there was no air to slow me down, so I flared, I went like this, and went 6 feet down on my butt. And the guy had wrote in my guidebook, landing, bummer. And I sat on a little inflatable rig for a moment. But any speech you can walk away from is a good one, so don't worry about it. You're in Toastmasters, you're supposed to be learning. So take the shot, get the speech, learn from it, get the evaluation. That's the key. It doesn't have to be perfect. You do want to be persistent and passionate. That's the key. Persistence and passion. Keep after it. Keep working on it. This is the one that I was telling you about where all of a sudden, I better check, there's 7 there? Okay, good. And for the life of me, I couldn't remember the last one. And the last one is probably the most important one, is be enjoyable. The 7 Beatitudes, this is me in Beijing. Be informative when you're speaking. Give them some information. Make sure that information is valuable. Make sure it's interesting. Because anybody can give data dump and give you information, but it takes real work to make it interesting. And that's our job, to make it interesting and engaging for our audience. Isn't it? That's where we bring our expertise and our skills and our backgrounds to play. Be memorable. You want them to remember what you said. You want them to remember how you made them feel because you challenged them to maybe dream bigger than they thought they could be. Like, think about, maybe you could be the world champion of public speaking next year. It could happen. Don't look at me like that. It could happen. Lots of people have said that, and a year or two later, they became it. It makes it believable. Make sure you believe it, because if you don't believe it, the audience doesn't believe it. Just that simple. And be inspirational. You want people to do something with what you tell them. You don't want to just talk and have them just say, well, that was nice. You want them to actually do something with it, Run out of the room, break the doors open, do something, And finally, be enjoyable. Have fun. If you have fun, the audience has fun. And it just makes it better for everybody. It makes it better for everybody all the way around. So keep that in mind. So this is what I'm talking about, being memorable. This statement is something that's actually in the Bob training room in Johannesburg, South Africa. I didn't know that until a friend of mine said, hey, I was just speaking for this company, and they said, do you want to speak in the Bob Hui room? That was something I said. It was an offhand remark. It's on wings. It's been in lists of best-selling things and salesman's things and stuff. I didn't know. But it's cool. You never know when you say something that might just make a difference that people talk about and pass on. So why not? So good openings. Talk about openings. I'm moving quickly through this because I want to give you as much as I can in our time. Short and punchy. Start, get into it. Don't take a long time. Don't do what they used to call those shaggy dog stories. It's this long story, and then it's got a horrible ending. That's what they used to call them. This long thing. And they get to the conclusion and go, why did you waste my time? Anyway, dramatic or thought-provoking. Start with something that catches people's attention. Don't be afraid to do something different. I've done weird stuff. I spoke for a big dairy products company, and I actually had them wheel me in on a wheeler, because these guys are delivery guys. They're delivering crates of milk. So, and as I stepped off, I said, once again, Saputo delivers. It was stupid, but it worked. I did another one where I showed up on stage in my pajamas and my bathrobe. That got talked about for years. People went, oh yeah, Vancouver bathrobe, yeah. And I said, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. We could be there. I actually dialogued it with the guy who was the introduction. I said, I'm going to come on. I'm just wander around and putter. And you say, by the way, Bob, there's people here. There's people here. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, they didn't forget. It was fun. I didn't tell the organizer that I was going to do it. I showed up fully dressed and changed into my pajamas and bathrobe backstage, so they never knew. Because it's better to ask permission than forgiveness. Or, No, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. Yeah, you get that. Starting a statement, make sure it's relevant. Think about what you're saying, is it relevant to the audience? If they relate to it, it makes more sense to them, they probably accept it in. And that builds a bond so you can start building a relationship. Because that's what a good speech is. It's a relationship between you as the speaker and the audience. And maybe a universal statement. How many of you know that blah, 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 blah? Or how many of you would agree that, taxes are too high? Nobody's gonna say, no, I wanna pay more taxes. Nobody in the right mind is gonna say that. You go, wait a minute, this is not the right place for me. You can use visuals, common experience, personal stories, whatever works for you. Just find something that you're comfortable with that allows you to say, here's how I'm gonna begin my presentation. Here's how I begin the relationship between you and me. Because with this time together, that's what it is, it's a relationship. And my job is to facilitate that, to make it easier. Endings. Have you ever been listening to somebody and they're reaching to a perfect point where they go, it's gonna close. And they said, make another 45 slides. It's false endings appearing real. Don't do that to your audience. Don't do that. Reach up to it, get to a point where you can close, and close. Summarize major points, refocus the main theme, relevant story, call to action. Don't be afraid to ask them to do something with it. Because that's okay. That's why you're speaking. There should be something behind what you're saying to say, at the end of this presentation, I want you to know, feel, or do something, and call to action, call you to do it. Sign up for our next Toastmaster meeting. Do this, whatever. Actually, I'm gonna do something before I talk about this, just before I forget. And Irene, if you wanna put your camera on, I'm gonna do this. I'll wait till she's doing this. I got a buddy in Canada, who's also a past district director, who Irene and I worked with to produce a book. It's a children's version of Speaking for Success, or something along that same line. And he had the idea, he wanted to do it, so Irene and I coached him and actually helped him put the book together. So I told him, I said, I've got a few of them left. He doesn't have any left yet. So he's gonna have to preprint now. And I said, I'm gonna bring one with me to Athens and we'll give one away to somebody. So when you're doing your giveaways afterwards, we'll give away one of these as well, okay? His name is Greg Gazin. He's a great guy. He's a smart man. If you've ever listened to the Toastmaster podcast, he's the guy that does that. He's a brilliant man. I'm privileged to ask him to be my friend. So anyway, now I just want to make sure I did that. Thank you. Greg, wish you were here. Okay, back to the program. Humor, punchlines. If you're telling a joke, which I don't always suggest, don't screw up the punchline. I've seen people do that. It's like, bah, 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 bah. No, wait a minute. I mean, that's funnier than the punchline. The punchline means exactly that. You're punching it. It's got to be funny. And one of the things I talked about yesterday, I said, I don't tell people that I'm funny, and I don't do jokes. I tell stories. And sometimes the stories have humor involved and people laugh. And if they laugh, that's good. If they don't laugh, I finish quicker. It's just they laugh, so it's okay. But I let them discover the humor, because that's your job, not mine. See, what I think is funny isn't what you think is funny, and vice versa. So if I'm going along and people laugh, I just learn to stop. That's what they go. Don't step on the laugh, because if you do that, people are back here laughing. You're still speaking, and you've lost them. So if they start laughing, then let them laugh. Let them enjoy it. And ask them later, why was that fun? Because I might teach you something. Be appropriate. You got to make sure that anything you're using in any kind of humor is appropriate for the audience and for the thing. I told people somewhere yesterday that I made the mistake of making fun of McDonald's during a presentation. I actually said, the packaging was more valuable than, more beneficial than the food. And the organizer told me after, he said, those two people from McDonald's. Whoops. So make sure you don't do that. Note to self. Don't pick on somebody that's in the audience. Anyway, timing is everything. If you're telling a joke or you're doing something funny, it's the timing that works. It's that sudden twist at the end that makes it funny. And there's a whole program you can get into on that. Be kind, please be kind. This is not the time to pick on people. I was on a cruise many, many years ago, and there was this guy, and he was one of those put-down comedians. He'd go, "Oh, nice dress," and he'd say, "Somewhere there's some drapes missing," that kind of stuff. And so I didn't like it, so I started shooting little love bombs from the front, and people just around me could hear it. I was funnier than he was. And then when he was doing something, I went up on stage and he said something. Where's the little fat guy gets in the thing? So I got up on stage and took a bow. And then I sat down. But you got to be appropriate, and you got to be kind. You don't have to pick on people. No vulgarity. And the other thing is, humor doesn't travel well. What's funny in Alberta might not be funny in Greece. Maybe it is, but you have to find out. And the best way to do that is to talk to somebody and say, "I have a joke that I'd like to share, or a story I'd like to share. It normally gets some good exposure. Would this be funny to you?" And if they go, "No," then don't use it. If they laugh, all right, put that in. Because that's the point. Laughter is an amazing thing. It's like a hug with the audience. When people laugh, it's kind of like getting a good hug. I don't know for you, but that's what it does for me when they laugh. So when I do a normal introduction, I build in something that usually will get some sort of a laugh or at least a chuckle. And if that happens, then I know, I'm going to have fun. Because if the audience is already laughing before I even come on stage, that's great. To me, that's fun. So, doesn't travel well. Here's a little humor I found. Doesn't that make, that's actually very wise. You can't believe what you hear on the internet. You just can't. Socrates, Anyway. So, in terms of putting together presentations, because we want to talk about that just briefly. This is what I call crafting. I have a number of ways that I do it. I used to do stuff when I first started. I did it the way they taught me to do compositions in school. First point, boom, boom, boom. Second point, boom, 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 and then you write it. And then I started doing some other things. One of the things I do is I write notes on little stickies. And then I group the notes. Because as you think of ideas, that would be good, that would be good, that would be good. And then sit down and say, okay, how do you put them together? Okay, that should really go with this. And this should go with this. And I'll show you the other part. This is essentially what clustering is a way of doing that. Where you cluster the pieces together to say, okay, I've got 3 or 4 things that have to do with this part of my topic. And I have some stuff that belongs to this part. So now I've done that, I'll say, okay, I'll start here, I'll go here, and I'll go here. And then I'll finish. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It helps you put it together. After a while, you can sit down and put together a presentation very quickly. What do I know? What do I know about the audience? What do I know about me? Okay, here's some points. What would make sense to lead with? Okay, I'll start with this. Then I'll do this. Then I'll do this. And then I'll shut up. I remember telling people, they said, how can you do a presentation with no notes? I said, like you did last night with your evaluation. As simple as the hand. I did this in the middle of a class once. I said, it's as simple as this. This is a 20-minute presentation, no notes. Opening, 3 points, and a conclusion. Depending on the length, you put stories and examples under them. I said, I can remember 5 things, can't you? That's in the book. That was brilliant. It just came out of nowhere. And it worked. And these people who weren't speakers, that were learning to be speakers as part of what we were training them, went, I get that. So you build your speech with the end in mind. Where have you heard that? Covey talks about, it's the same thing. What do you want to accomplish? What do you want them to feel, or do, or think when you're done? That's how you structure. Spice Club. Stories, quotes, facts, props, costumes, handouts, AV slides. What are the tools that you're using to help you deliver your presentation? I'm going to check in with my timer to see where we're sitting.
39 minutes.
Okay, good. Then we're right on time. Remember I talked about visuals just briefly? Check to make sure they're clear. Make them relevant. Don't overdo them. You know, keep them simple, keep them short. Don't read them. Have you seen somebody doing that? They've got PowerPoint and they're reading the frickin' PowerPoint. When I do that, I almost feel like yelling, I can read faster than you can talk. Next slide. Because I'm already done. Then I speed read, so I'm done. Show them only when you're referring to and make direct reference to the slide that you're talking about. And talk to us, not the AV. Because this is what's important. It's the people here, not that. That's just the guy to make sure that I stay on time. Good stories, better speeches. Anybody recognize my friend in the background? I was so, I'm not gonna say disappointed, I was so surprised that this was a small little thing like this and you couldn't get to it. They had a rope and then they had plexiglass and there was this little picture like this. I'd seen it in bigger thing. I was expecting this big painting and it was this little thing. You know, I'm going, no wonder she's smiling. She caught us all. But people like stories. Stories will help people pay attention. They remember things. If you tell a story, in the midst of the story is the lesson you're trying to get across to people. They may not remember the lesson, but they'll remember the story and then the lesson comes out. And that's a secret. If you're a good speaker, you're a good storyteller. Because in the story, you have the hook that brings people in and say, here's what I want to teach you. Can add humor. It can be a motivational tool. Here's a key. When you're telling a story, don't just tell the story. Be in the story. So I was saying to, I was talking to, see the difference? You're in the story. You're reacting to the person and they can see the dialogue. They can see something happen because you're actually doing something where you're acting out. Be in the midst of the story. Don't be just on the outside telling the story. So I saw the Toastmaster and I said, blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Techniques we don't have time to go into. Have you ever seen a movie?
Yeah.
How's that for like an obvious question? Yeah. Have you seen it where they open with something and then they go back to the beginning?
Yes.
That's called foreshadowing. Or they do something where it's a flashback, where they're doing it, they go back when I was a little kid and I was over here, and that's why I got to be over here tearing up the world and whatever. That's flashback.
Like Benjamin Button movie?
Hmm?
The Benjamin Button movie?
No, it doesn't have to be bad movies. It can be good.
Benjamin Button.
Yes.
That one.
Yeah, but you're allowed to play that. You can do that with your stories too. You can start with something and then say, okay, now let me explain where this came from. And just physically move back. You know, you've been over here. We don't have time to talk about staging and using the stage, but you can do that where you're talking here. And let me explain to you this. Or where you're doing something, you say, so I was talking to, and he said, anyway, learn from the masters. I have been so blessed in my life in the last 32 years to have worked with some amazing speakers, who a lot of them have become friends and have invested in my life and have encouraged me to grow and giving me their time and their effort and their encouragement and their skill sets so that I got better. That was their gift to me, and I get to pass it on to you, which is really the cool part of all of this. The first thing is show your passion. I talked about that earlier. People will forgive anything except being boring. I mean, how many of you love boring speakers? I'm not seeing any hands go up now. But seriously, as long as you're not boring, they'll forgive anything, folks. They just will. If they see that you believe what you're saying and you've got some energy behind it and you're moving into it, they get it and they'll have fun with it. Tell your own stories. Make sure the stories you tell are relevant to the audience and relevant to the presentation so that you're not just, oh, I got a great story, I'll use it. If it doesn't fit this presentation, don't use it. But make sure it's relevant. Take risks. Try something different. I have a friend in the National Speakers Association. She always does about 5 or 10% brand new every time she does a presentation, even if she's done the presentation 50 times. Because she wants to expand. She wants to experience. She wants to keep growing. But she's a nerd. She's older than me, but she's still learning. And that's the whole point. Connect from the This is where they filter it. So you pick the words that evoke the emotion. This is where you connect. You pick the words that get here. And when you get them here, you got them. That's where you get your messages. And have fun. There's my friend Socrates. I figure that's a good place to finish. So thank you very much.